All right, folks, you know that feeling when you watch the world unravel and think, has everyone, of course excluding ourselves, completely lost their minds? Well, our next guest has been saying exactly that, except with research to back it up. Dr. Saad, a professor at Northwood University and a part-time troublemaker on social media, has spent years studying and calling out the wildest ideological absurdities of our time. From radical sympathisers to open border policies to the absolute circus of wokeism. And now he's putting it all together in his upcoming book, Suicidal Empathy. His argument: Western society isn't just making bad choices, it's actively self-destructing. Why? Because instead of using common sense, we've embraced a bizarre, self-flagellating ideology where being endlessly apologetic is more important than survival. Dr. Saad, it is always such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm so happy to be with you, and I'm happy that you are reaching new heights in your fame and stardom. You certainly deserve it.
Oh, bless you. And I know coming from you that that has to be genuine, because you also like to tell people you're the best looking man in the world. So I believe everything you say.
I mean, look at me. Do I have to say anything more?
Doctor, I was just looking at your X feed, which is how I start all of my research before these chats these days. And you had done a post about losing a 30-year friendship because you wrote something that was semi-positive regarding President Donald Trump. What is going on?
You know, last week I had gone to Savannah, Georgia, and to Mississippi, to the University of Mississippi. And when in Savannah, I was speaking at a Republican club gathering. And so I reached out to this gentleman who I knew was in the Savannah/Atlanta area. We had originally met when we were both students at Cornell. We had hit it off famously well. Now, we weren't living in the same city, so I can't pretend that we've been seeing each other, every day of our lives. But I'd always held a very, very strong, affection for him. And that's why when I got to Savannah, I reached out to him. He said he couldn't meet me. Then I reached out to him again. I said, well, I'm back in Montreal now. Maybe we could have a Zoom meeting. He then writes me this long email, privately on LinkedIn, where he basically says, look, I saw what you said about Donald Trump. And let me just summarize what it is. It's actually my pinned post on my X feed. I basically said something to the effect of, imagine that 95 to 99% of my academic colleagues continue to think that Kamala Harris would be a better president than Donald Trump. Either I'm the biggest idiot or they might be wrong. That's all I said. Of course, Elon Musk responded right away, no, you're right. But this gentleman thought that it was beyond the pale for me to make such a statement. So he said, unfortunately, we can't move forward in our friendship. And here it is.
What leads people to that position where they cannot see a way forward if they disagree with someone on something? They can't engage. They just shut down.
Well, I mean, that's exactly a manifestation of the parasitic mind, right? Because what he's effectively saying is that there's only one possible state of the world, and that is to think that Donald Trump is indistinguishable from Hitler. And if you don't believe that, then you are morally damaged, right? I mean, it literally is that, right? I mean, so for example, what about if I'm Jewish, which I am, and I think that the Democratic Party is filled with a lot more anti-Semites than the Republican Party? Would that grant me a bit of an affordance, oh dear moral one, to prefer the Republicans? Right? So there are many, many ways by which perfectly rational and reasonable people could think that the Republican Party, given the issues that they care about, would be the optimal choice. He can't afford you that courtesy. Therefore, I'm a moral degenerate. Therefore, he has to break the ties with me.
So that would then mean that he thinks all the people, the millions and millions of Americans, the popular vote, every swing state, they're all morally bankrupt, essentially, as well.
Exactly. Including a neighbor of mine who, this gentleman that defriended me or unfriended me is black. This neighbor of mine him and his wife moved recently from the Bay Area in San Francisco. They moved to Montreal. He confided in me that he used to be an ultra anti-Trumper in the first term of Trump. He was super woke. He's now exactly the opposite. He also happens to be black. So I wrote to him jokingly, I texted him to my neighbor, and I said, well, the other black friend told me that, I'm not supporting the community, meaning the black community, by being pro-Trump. So I could only assume that you are a fake black person. And then he writes back to me, because he is self-assured, because he's not a woke idiot. He goes, no, I'm not actually a black guy. It's an illusion of your mind. I'm a white guy. So reasonable people can joke around, but I'll just give you a quick story. I never said this publicly. So we joke around, him and I. Whenever I see him in our neighborhood, I will pretend as though I'm getting very, very scared because I'm seeing a black guy. So I'll pick up my phone and I'll start calling the cops. He start laughing hysterically. Secure people are able to make fun of themselves, make fun of others without capitulating like a little wilted flower. That's life.
A current example for me is doing this very show, 69X Minutes, with someone that some people don't like in the Jewish community, and they don't think that I should share a platform with someone they dislike, disagree with, don't think fondly of. But my take would be, shouldn't I be trying to reach the largest audience possible, particularly people who might not see it the way that we see it? Isn't that what this is all about, engaging with people who don't agree with you?
That's a beautiful point. So there's a great book that I cite in chapter 7 of The Parasitic Mind. The chapter is titled How to Seek Truth. And in that, at the start of the chapter, I talk about this book by two French psychologists, where they argued that the human capacity to reason did not evolve to seek truth, but rather to win arguments, right? And therefore, it doesn't. So yes, you and I might be thinking, hey, shouldn't we be reaching across the aisle because we're all trying to ultimately make sense of the world and seek some objective truth? Yes, that's all nice. But when your coalitional thinking takes over, which is blue team versus red team, I don't care about truth. I care about my team being right. That's exactly what causes the Democrats to not clap and be touched when a 13-year-old brain cancer survivor is up there. If you're unable to see beyond your tribal allegiance and unite over the story of a 13-year-old brain cancer survivor, that's what orgiastic tribalism looks like.
What is the greatest threat, existential threat to our world right now? Because I tend to think it could be this parasitic mind that you speak of.
Right. Well, I repeatedly keep saying, Erin, that there is nothing in nature that is remotely as dangerous as a parasitized mind, right? Now, think of it this way. 300 years ago in Massachusetts, people thought that this was a perfectly good way to organize society. If we think that Linda, our neighbor, is a witch, we throw her in water. If she does end up swimming and not drowning, then that proves that she is a witch, and then we'll burn her at the stake. If she ends up drowning, then oops, I guess she wasn't a witch. Now that's a small microcosm. Now somewhat elsewhere, 80 years ago, there was a little guy with a mustache who genuinely thought that Jews were parasites, they were vermin, they were rats. So it was perfectly reasonable for him to pursue an extermination strategy. So if you look throughout history, the greatest disasters begin with a parasitic idea and off we go. Yes, natural disasters can be devastating, but nothing is as dangerous as when this guy goes bad.
I kept becoming frustrated by something that I couldn't define until I spoke to you for the first time, and I explained the situation. I said, I'm a mother, I care about kids in Gaza, that's why I stand up against the terrorists who are causing them so much pain. Why do people think that? And you said, suicidal empathy. This is your new book, and I reckon this could be the greatest thing you ever do. What is it, and why is it, and how is it destroying us?
Excuse me for the cough. So the parasitic mind was about what happens to our cognitive processes when they are zombified. But of course, human beings are both a thinking and feeling animal. So if the parasitic mind is saying what happens to our cognition when it is parasitized, suicidal empathy completes the story by saying, wait a minute, in order to completely zombify you, I also have to parasitize your emotional, your affective system. So that's the general story. Now, specifically, suicidal empathy, the reason why it's empathy, not some other emotion, because all of the devastatingly bad public policy decisions that we're seeing both domestically and in foreign policy in the West stem from a misfiring of empathy, right? So it is wrong of us to say that some immigrants are less likely to assimilate than others. We're all equally likely to assimilate. That sounds nice. It sounds kind. It sounds compassionate. It's about as true as you jumping off a building and gravity not killing you, but at least I am a kind and empathetic person. It's also very kind if I let in MS-13 gang members from El Salvador and give them free stuff more than American vets who've lost their limbs, if not their lives, fighting for the United States. That seems kind. It's also kind when we don't put felons who've already had 87 convictions, putting them in prison for a long time, because especially if they are felons of color, society has already damaged them, because we live in a white supremacist society where they are forced to become criminals. So what's the point of you putting them behind bars for the rest of their life? Can't you be kind? So I can go through every single insane policy decision and demonstrate to you that it at its root, it stems from dysregulated empathy.
So, Doctor, I've got one question left for you, and I mean, you're brilliant, but this might stretch it, I think, even for you. How do we solve this virus? Is there an injection we can take? Like, how do we stop the world falling prey to something that will eventually kill us all?
Well, so it's actually a two-pronged attack, because you really do need a vaccine against the parasitic ideas and against the suicidal empathy, but they go in tandem. So let me give you a very concrete example. Cultural relativism is a parasitic idea that afflicts your ability to think. Cultural relativism says, who are you to judge the beliefs and the behaviors of another culture? If another culture wishes to cut off the clitorises of 5-year-old girls, that's their right to do so. Don't be a cultural imperialist. Well, because I might be infected by cultural relativism, it is that then allows my suicidal empathy to be properly triggered. It's a 1-2 punch. The parasitic idea disarms my cognition, and then here comes the zombified emotional system. So the way you do that is by fighting against those dreadful ideas. There is no alternative. It's when Erin calls you to come on her show and you're sick with what looks like bronchitis, you say, I'm going to tough it and go on. And then eventually people do come around. I've had, I mean, literally thousands and thousands of people who've written to me and said, you know, you saved me from the insanity that I used to believe in. And so there is no other alternative other than to win the battle of ideas.
It's a long, hard slog, but it's a battle you are fighting bravely on behalf of us all. Dr. Saad, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Always a pleasure. Thank you.